Silksong hastens the death of the Critic. They announced the game 2 weeks before release. They didn't do pre-orders. They didn't give anyone review copies or do a alpha or beta test a year in advance. I'm not saying those things are bad, mind you. I'm just saying that Silksong didn't do any of those things and still almost hitting 600,000 concurrent players on just Steam. And that's not even counting the peasant box sales and concurrent player counts, which we have like no way to see. I think the journalists are starting to realize that they actually might be a little bit outdated, as they should. Yeah, no pre-orders hurt the platforms. Yeah, no, that I agree with. So that's why, like I mentioned this last week. You know how like Black Myth Wukong had 2.5 million concurrent players, and yet they didn't break Steam, yet Silksong did. The reason Silksong broke Steam is because they didn't have pre-orders. So everybody that wanted to play the game day one was all trying to buy it at the same time. So that's the one thing that didn't happen. Like with Wukong, I'm willing to bet that 2 million out of those 2.5 million concurrent players already bought the game and had it preloaded like a week in advance. So that's why Silksong broke all the storefronts, but these bigger games didn't. But now that that's out of the way, let's go back to laughing at the journalists. We know games criticism is dying. We don't need to rub it in. Well, it wouldn't be if they did a good job. Yeah, the problem is that game journalists, like, they're not gamers that are just doing the job as a hobby anymore. A lot of them hate gaming. A lot of them hate gamers. They're here because they're trying to change the hobby, not because they love it for what it is. And that's why that's why it's dying. That's why the actual gamers don't want anything to do with them. They're basically enemy infiltrators. But anyway, that aside, shortly after it was announced that Hollow Knight Silksong would be surprise dropping in just 2 weeks, Team Cherry disclosed that no press outlet would be getting codes ahead of time. Jason Schreier reported them as saying that it would be unfair for critics to be playing before the Kickstarter backers and other players. Are they wrong? This could feel benign. Press and fans alike praise the decision, but however small, this represents a deterioration of the criticism as a profession, an art, and as a service to the audience. That service still exists. Look, live streamers fill this role now. If you're on the fence about one of these games, you could just go to a live streamer's channel and watch them play the game for a few sessions and before you make your decision. None of this shit's hard anymore. We don't need access media because it's been revealed to us that there is no circumstance in which access media is good. There is no circumstance in which access media is worth anything because, and what do I mean by access media? That's what happens when these legacy outlets and now a lot of the new live streamers as well, when they basically glaze these companies so they could get early access. So the company gets pretty much guaranteed positive reviews, so that's how they benefit. The content creator gets to stream something their competition isn't early, so they get that advantage. So they basically work together. They each have something to gain with this relationship. We definitely do not need any more access media. If all game companies were like Team Cherry in this regard, like, yeah, no one's going to get it early. Everyone's going to get it at release date. So that would be so much better. Let me address some of the obvious counter arguments. The game is destined to be a financial success, even if it in any way fails to live up to the absurd hype. Reviews might influence the game's reception, but its overall perception will be shaped more by video essays months after the fact than any article around launch. But also you got to realize no one cares about the perception long term unless it leads to sales. Because like any game, or rather, unlike the first Hollow Knight, This game is probably going to front load most of its sales, and it'll be just like any other game. It's going to drop off as time goes by. So once 99% of the game's sales have already been made, does it really matter what all those video essays months later have to say? Because I would argue it's not that important. Now, anyway, as Exotega on third tier miscellany points out, reviewers won't really be able to dig into Silksong over the course of 2 measly weeks. Even if they were to spend every moment of an 8-hour workday playing and writing about it, an impossibility for essentially every writer in the space, it would be a lot to get through. Okay, so how about this? This might be a hot take, but I personally don't think someone should have to finish a game to do a review on it. Instead of calling them reviews, just call them impressions. Because in my personal opinion, if you can't be bothered to finish a game, that in and of itself is an important piece of information. I personally, I think it's fair if a reviewer came out and said, I hated this game so much, I couldn't play it for more than 3 hours. 3 hours is all I could stomach before I gave up. There's no amount of, well, but it gets good at the 45th hour that could get most people to overcome that hurdle. I think that is perfectly valid information. So instead of trying to do like effectively a full walkthrough of the game, which I mean, those are valid too, but those could come later. So just do the quick first impressions in the first week, and then you could focus on 100%ing it. Yeah, Yahtzee's done that. Yeah, and he's way more popular than any of the other guys, isn't he? Yeah, if it can't grab you in the first 2 hours, don't force it and give biased data. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that being said, I really don't think there's any place for reviewers nowadays. In a world where you can watch a live streamer play the game yourself from start to finish, what do you need a reviewer for? Like you could literally watch someone else play the game and come to your own conclusion as to whether you think it's worth buying or not. But man, I'm just kind of, I had to say that because I can't think of a single example in my own real life where I didn't like a game 4 hours in, but I started liking it later. There are a few games that they may have had a slow start, but I can't think of one that I actively hated that it changed my mind 10 hours in. At some point, you're just like, nah, you know what? I'm dropping this one. Yeah, Splattercat is a great replace. Yeah, that guy's really good, actually. He covers a lot of a little bit more obscure games too. Yeah, exactly. Just go watch someone like that if you want the equivalent. That Final Fantasy Tactics so much slow scrolling text scenes. Yeah, I guess if it's like that, you only need to watch a few battles to see if the gameplay is up your alley. And then maybe watch a few of the story scenes to see if the story interests you. That's pretty much all you really need to do. That idea of having print media and gaming is an obsolete concept. I know. It does kind of make me sad, though. Like when I see, when you usually it's boomers. When you see some fucking boomers out there, like, oh, I'm gonna bring back good gaming journalism websites, and we keep trying to tell them, like, no, that whole concept is dead. Stop. So that would be like me going out into my neighborhood, like, oh, I'm gonna start a local print newspaper, but it's totally gonna be successful because I'm gonna give my neighborhood what they want. Like, well, but what my neighborhood wants is to get all that same information from a fucking ticker on a website. However, the suggestion that the lack of early codes will prevent that crunch is absurd. The rush to have the first take or to be the first to have a suite of guides to draw in Silksong players would be too intoxicating to forego. That sounds like a you problem. You're literally saying it's, oh yeah, us and our peers are going to do a mad rush to try to one-up each other and be the first ones to talk about this. So it's still going to create a problem for us. Like, yeah, but that's a you problem. Nobody cares. That's a you problem. Even 2 weeks offers a broad timeline, however unreasonable. The crunch will put some strain on mainstream sites, but the biggest victims will be the teams of freelancers at sites owned by Valnet or Gamers Group. With little editorial oversight and measly payments per article, teams of unpaid writers will squeeze every bit of content they can muster out of Silksong's dozens of hours. They probably will, and it's going to be funny. None of that, to be clear, is Team Cherry's fault. Well, at least you admit that much. The free-for-all would happen whether they did or didn't distribute the codes. It's a cycle of churn that most outlets find themselves in. Brendan Sinclair at GamerStreet.biz made a similar case when star-failed codes didn't make it to some outlets 2 whole years ago. These problems stretch back far longer. Oh, you know, I would love for one of these big hype games to like do the opposite. Like they wouldn't send any codes to the legacy media, but instead they send them to like Asmongold. Like the top streamers, like XQC gets a code, Quinn gets a code, the Asmongold gets a code. But these legacy print outlets, nah, we don't think it's worth anything here. Additionally, the woes of game criticism are far from unique. Both the Chicago Tribune and Chicago Sun-Times film critic positions are recently laid off, meaning that the newspapers that produce Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel have no film critics to their name, on staff anyway. Well, yeah, that entire profession is pretty much dying, especially since, after enough years of the critics and the audiences misaligning, like, audiences don't trust critics anymore for good reason. Vanity Fair and the New York Lives recently fired critics or pivoted to video. The deterioration of arts funding has hit criticism just as hard as any other field. Is this going to be just like how the lolcowizers think that they are creatives? But does that let Team Cherry off the hook? In a word, no. Well, guess what? No one cares though. Why would they care? You're literally nobody to them. If Ubisoft or Sony dodged launch reviews, that would be suspicious. If Bethesda and Xbox only halfway got away with it with Starfield because they gave codes to most outlets, Team Cherry can do it because it's almost bottomless reservoir of goodwill and because they have the excuse of being a small team. Though unlike most small teams, they have nigh infinite resources. Yeah, but they need to use that for buying hentai or whatever else they might spend that money on. However, well-intentioned, Team Cherry's decision would be the preferred model of every executive. Let us move the product directly to the consumer without the pesky interference of critics who might muck things up with their opinions, as you think of Homer Simpson eating donuts in hell. And this is a blatant lie. Like, this is blatant misdirection. Are you telling me that your average executive wants to skip the media entirely because they might say bad things about your game? You mean the same executives that generally have very buddy relationships with the media to maintain their access, so that they all know they better not give a negative review or they will not get codes next time? So that they're basically industry mouthpieces. Like, are you trying to tell me that these executives want to cut out their industry mouthpieces that just do their bidding for early access? That's kind of hard to believe. Now, how did we get here? Well, it's a complicated, wide-ranging question. Well, let me answer that for you. You guys have spent way too much time lying. And after years of critic and audience expectations being polar opposites, eventually the audience was like, why are we listening to these guys? They hate everything we like, and they like everything we hate. It makes no sense to put any stock in what they say. I want to focus on the emotional landscape of criticism. Oh, immediately going to appeals to emotion. That's how you know you got the facts on your side, right? I find it easy to think of criticism as an insular practice, one focused on the subjective opinions of a specialized few. This is, of course, rooted in some truth, but beyond the cultural pressures and elite institutions, a review is a conversation. Oh, God, but this is like the SJW definition of conversation. Like, they don't mean a back and forth conversation. They mean you sit down and shut up while we lecture you. That's what they mean when they say that word, when they say conversation. There's a shared thing between the critic and the reader, an experience had or yet to be had that the critic is trying to build a bridge to. A critic can offer clarity about complex or formally difficult works. She can also lend words to experiences as yet unvoiced, offering understanding of to marginal art and perspective beyond the mainstream. So pretty much all useless shit to the average consumer that just wants to play a fun game. Well, but you're not thinking about this from the perspective of an oppressed group. No one cares. I just want to play a fun game. Critic can be wrong or right. When she's good, doesn't really matter. There's this kind of truth that goes beyond correctness. Critic's articulation about of a position forces the reader to respond, even just in their mind. In an age of loneliness and defensiveness, it's easy to undervalue that exchange. Yeah, I love how they call it an exchange too. We lecture you, and you react in some way, and therefore that's an exchange. Well, guess what, man? Like any live streamer can do this, and the live streamer will actually have more actual exchange via their chat. Look, I bear plenty of cynicism about this profession. I've written often and forcefully about how to narrow the gap between the PR and criticism in video games. But I think that, but I do think there is a gap. Even mainstream outlets like GameSpot have battled consensus, boosted hot takes, or even just published controversial reviews. Team Cherry's decision enforces the structure of the enthusiast press. If critics are merely fans with access, then it would be unfair to give them early keys. But in reality, a critic works. Any obstacle to that work is an obstacle to the way of conversation and thought. Yeah, it's going to be harder for us to brainwash you if you cut us out. And I love how they kind of like low key admitted there that the critics aren't fans with access. Yeah, most of these critics hate the medium. Oh, this makes sense. This author, Grace Benfell, is a queer whammons. That's the first fucking thing they write. A queer whammons critic and aspiring fan fiction author. But we see their priorities there. Like that's why they're writing these articles. That's why they're scared. Because we don't need them anymore, and we're not going to give them any centralized place to infest anymore. But yeah, when you're such a boring person, you open with your sexual identity. Yeah, that's a sign that you're kind of fucked up.